Perhaps the trickiest jobs and roles to work in is being a full stack engineer, a web developer, or a software engineer, where you're working with multiple clients, servicing different projects, and have so many different roles that you can do. In this video, let's try and navigate this minefield and get a few principles together to help you understand what is halal, what is not halal, and where you need to turn to scholars. So the first principle to keep in mind is your income is against the services you provide. That's the most important thing to remember. Your earnings will be lawful as long as the services you've been contracted to do are lawful. If the services that are in your contract, in your agreement are unlawful, your income will be unlawful. The second principle to remember is that you must be working on a project which in and of itself is halal. There's nothing impermissible in that project, and therefore your income will be lawful. Of course, if a role is involving haram, you're working on a project which is completely where you are creating a sinful app or a website, which is fundamentally, intrinsically creating sin, being used to execute sinful trades, transactions, or sinful content, or anything unlawful, then that will be unlawful for you to create, because now you've worked and developed something which can only be used in a sinful way, and you are the architect of that, and you'll be sinful, and hence your income will be unlawful. The next principle is, well, what if you're working on something which is in and of itself generic and halal, but your client will be using your generic program, the website, in an unlawful way? According to the majority, they're of the view that because you've enabled this, you'll be sinful. You are part of the supply chain, and therefore that will be ascribed to you. You are doing ta'awun al-ithm. You're supporting a sinful activity by being part of the supply chain. On the other hand, the view of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is that the sinful activity has been perpetrated by another entity, by another person. They themselves, with their own volition, their own agency, their own intention, their own activity, have created the sin and perpetrated the misgiving. And that cannot be ascribed to you as an individual. وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. And therefore you are now remote from the sin because there's somebody else with their own volition who's perpetrated that. And you can't be liable for that. And hence this principle of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah is very useful for people who are trying to navigate this challenging minefield of looking at what the clients are doing. Hence, if your client is potentially going to do something unlawful and you're an employee, you don't have a say in how they'll use this, there's just another client that have come to you, then as long as what you've done is lawful, there is scope to consider that your work to be lawful and your income to be halal, irrespective of what the client will be eventually doing. Of course, if you have control, it's your own company, you can have your own guidelines and policies on which clients you want to take on and try to accommodate the majority view. The final question then comes is, what if you are working on a project which is largely permissible, lawful, and there's just one element perhaps which is a question mark, it's blurry, it's grey? How would you navigate that scenario? Well, the best answer here is to turn to your local scholars, your local muftis, those who are experts in financial matters, because really it'll be on a case-by-case scenario. A generalized ruling is very difficult to give, and some of the answers that are typically given in these contexts are that depending on what you are actually doing, you may receive advice that you seek tawbah from Allah and you give that particular activity to somebody else in your team. If you can and you have the ability to hand over the responsibility of this particular role to somebody else, then you should do so. If you can't do that and it's not a major wrong in and of itself, rather it's something which is perhaps minor or debatable, questionable, it's a contemporary matter, then there may be scope for the scholar to advise you, saying that purify your income and seek tawbah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for being involved in that. Or it could even be they tell you to excuse yourself in the most respectful way. And all of these answers are possible. It all depends on the scenario at hand, the question at hand, and the particular matter. And these are the guidelines when it comes to this particular role. Anyone who has any questions, feel free to reach out to us or reach out to your local scholars. We'll be more than happy to help you.